Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about the water companies. I want to mention some of the avalanche of stories of bad news that have caught my eye in the last week or so, and I want to talk also a little bit about the economy, but in such a way as to explain how, in my view, any optimism we might have should be very measured, because I think things are going to get a lot worse, and they will continue getting worse for quite a long time from now. Nothing is going to start turning, even with a change of government. Nothing is going to start getting very much better very quickly. So to begin with the water companies. Now we all know that the sewage companies. It's been announced last week. They were tipping sewage into the rivers and the sea for 3.6 million hours last year, and this is double the previous record, because it seems to be acceptable. That's what they do with with sewage. And I just wanted to tell you about something that happened to me at the end of last year. I live in West London, and occasionally I go to Wembley in order to do some shopping. Now, Wembley is a very much an Indian area. There's a road there called Ealing Road, and it's full of Indian restaurants and a lot of food shops, fantastic food shops, absolutely brilliant, and lovely fresh food and so on. And it's quite a nice, sort of bustling, interesting place. That's by the by. Anyway, it was one evening, it was dark, it was towards the end of the year, and I was driving up Ealing Road, and I went around a corner and the road dips down a bit. There'd been quite a lot of rain that afternoon, and there'd been a bit of a storm a bit earlier, half an hour or so earlier. And as I came round the road, the corner, I saw for about 150 yards or so, the road was flooded. It was really flooded to the depth, I suppose, maximum depth of about a foot. And this water was all sort of washing up towards these food shops and the restaurants and so on. And the notable thing was lots and lots of people around, sort of tiptoeing through all this water and so on, and trying to get around it. But the notable thing about this water was that it was accompanied by a really sort of deep, sweet, intense, pungent smell of sewage. The whole place stank of sewage. It was absolutely, utterly disgusting. You wanted to vomit. And this was in a car with the windows shut. And I thought at the time, here we are, we're living in this supposed to be a civilized country, one of the richest countries in the world. And this, where I was, is exactly 7 miles from Piccadilly Circus. And there we are, seeing people wading through sewage. How many of those people were wading through sewage and then going in and out the shops and out the restaurants? And we've got sewage floating in the streets. And we all know, because it's been so much publicity about how water companies are just chucking so much sewage into the rivers and the seas. Because it's easier, it's profitable, and it's simpler for them, and it's less bother. And I was looking at Thames Water, because Thames Water are responsible for London Water. And I was looking at the ownership, and I was thinking about how absolutely, utterly insane it is that foreigners own all so many of our utilities. It's not just water. I mean, most of the water companies are foreign-owned, or principally foreign-owned. It's the same with the railways. It's the same with electricity. It's the same with gas. These are all natural monopolies, and yet we've sold them off to foreigners who have no real interest in how well these utilities perform. And just looking at Thames Water, for example, 31.7%, so almost a third of it, belongs to the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System. Now, I don't think they have any experience of running water companies. I don't think they know anything about it. I think they've invested that money because they think they're going to get a return. Another 8.7% belongs to the British Columbia Investment Company. An investment company invests money to get a return. 9.9% belongs to Infinity Investments. That belongs to Abu Dhabi. And most notably, 8.7% belongs to China Investments, and that was the Chinese government. And then there are Australians involved, there are Germans, there are Asians, and there are Dutch. And we own just under 20% of it. And I thought to myself, what madness is this, that investment companies all over the world, own the source of supply of clean water and the removal of waste for 8 million Londoners. I mean, it's insane. And can you imagine, supposedly in Shanghai, every time somebody paid their water bill, we got a chunk of it because they'd sold it off to us or they'd sold it off to some other country. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And when the water companies were taken over, when they were sold, when they were privatised, they had no debt at all. And since they were taken over, which was 1989, 30 years, they've run up £60 billion worth of debt. In other words, they've used the assets of the water companies to borrow £60,000 million. In addition to that, they've taken £12,000 million from people's payments, people's bills, added together £72,000 million. And what have they done with that? Have they built any new reservoirs? No, not a single one. Have they maintained the infrastructure in such a way as there isn't sewage in the rivers and the sea? No, they haven't done anything of that. What they did, they dished it out as dividends. They shared it out amongst themselves. They must think we're the stupidest people on earth. We sell them the water companies for next to nothing, and then they start borrowing money with the assets. And now, when they're asked, Thames Water was asked, what are you going to do about fixing all this, but sorting it all out? They say, we're going to have to put the water bills up because we can't afford it. We've spent all the money, we've dished it all out and had a good time. No, we can't afford it. The customers are going to have to pay for it. 40% increase they want for water bills in order to do what they should have been doing all along. It's an absolute disgrace. Personally, if it were me, I would say, spend these many billions within the next 6 months, commit to spending that much money, or we'll just confiscate the whole thing from you because you're negligent, you haven't provided the service you should have provided. But of course they won't do that. They'll dance around a bit, and I expect there are probably quite a lot of Tory donors amongst the water company owners, and it'll just go on going down. But there is a really important extra point to this, and it's this. I've travelled all over the world a lot, as I probably mentioned many times before, and I've lost count of the number of times, particularly when you're far away, particularly in the Far East and so on, where people will say to me when they find I come from London, they'll say, "Oh, it must be terrible, all that fog in London." And I always reply, well, I've lived in London 40 years, there's never been any fog. We had a Clean Air Act in 1950-something, and there isn't any fog in London. And then they'll say, well, it must be terrible that it rains every day. And I say, it doesn't rain every day. It rains no more in London than it does in Paris. And so there's this misconception which is just stuck. And I have a feeling that this thing with the sewage, which will have gone all around the world, everybody in the world is going to know that our rivers aren't safe and that our seas aren't safe and so on. Even the French, they're calling us Île de Merde, shit island. And I have a feeling that when we go abroad in future, there's every possibility, unless this thing is sorted out very quickly, that people can say you come from that sort of dirty, smelly country where you can't properly deal with your sewage. I mean, even now, today, it's the boat race. And the crews have been advised, if you've got any cuts or any spots or anything, to cover them up, because if you get in contact with the river, the River Thames, it might be dangerous. There could be E. coli and so on. And the tradition whereby the winning crew throw their cocks into the river, they've been told not to do that this year because it's dangerous. It's dangerous to go in the Thames. I mean, really. And I saw the guy who's the chairman of the Environment Committee, Audit Committee, Select Committee in Parliament, a guy called Philip Dunn. He was being interviewed on Newsnight the other night, and he was kind of explaining why it was so bad, because he was explaining how it had extra rainfall and so on, and there's climate change, and it's this and it's that, and it's the last government that didn't invest enough money and so on. Excuses. It's just people who've seen an opportunity and made a load of money, and they've used our assets, our water companies, in order to raise money to dish out amongst themselves. It's really, it is just horrendous. Anyway, some of the other stories that I've just noticed during the course of the week. Sales of goods, imports and exports of goods are down 7.4%, according to Bloomberg. That's costing us $100 billion a year. People with passports, if they're more than 10 years old, it's going to affect up to 2.4 million people are being turned away from the EU when they arrive. Car exports to Canada, as from today or from the 1st of April, are going to go up by 6% because we haven't negotiated a deal. This is the deal which Badnock said. She said that she was still negotiating. The Canadians said that she'd walked out and there were no negotiations going on. And I think that also applies to cheese and one or two other things as well. So that's going to hit our exports a bit more. Tourism, particularly in London, it generates £72 billion a year. And the Tories, in order to trash Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, put out an advert showing London as just really crime-ridden and a desperate place, absolutely running it down and terrifying anybody from ever coming here. That they thought was a smart thing to do with regard to tourism. I've already talked about how, because we insist on Europeans having passports now, visits from Europeans have absolutely collapsed since Brexit. And I think once upon a time, if you go back before Brexit, there were 100 souvenir shops in prominent locations throughout London. Now you find there's a handful because European tourists are not coming. British Gas, I think this is an old story actually, their profits were up from 72 million to 750 million, and the CEO has got a rise of 4 million, which is nice. The Guardian reported that nurses from outside of the EU, that's from all these countries where we're advertising to try and get them to come here, they're coming here, a lot of them apparently getting a certain amount of training here, and then they're going off to other countries where they earn more money, because British nurses are paid less than almost any other country in the OECD. Child poverty is interesting. In Denmark, 2.4% of children are in poverty. Finland, it's 3.2%. In Norway and Sweden, it's 3.6%. In the UK, it's 28.3%. 28 out of every 100 children in this country are now in poverty. That now we brought in some initial controls of stuff coming to the country, not proper controls, not proper controlling goods, it's all to do with paperwork and so on. Apparently at Sevington it's got so behind, and they've got so many delays that they're just now letting lorries through as they were doing before, because we can't cope with the paperwork. Nick Timothy, he's the guy who was very keen on a hard Brexit. He was a personal assistant to Theresa May, persuaded her to go for a hard Brexit. He was writing in the Telegraph last week saying that Brexit has been a disaster. HS2, it's costing 100 billion. That's 600 million pounds per mile. Compared with other countries, it's 10 times what it would cost or more anywhere else. You might ask, where's the money going? A guy called Mohammed Mansour, this is yesterday, he's been given a knighthood. He was a minister in Mubarak's government in Egypt before Mubarak was sent to prison for corruption. He's been given a knighthood for services to donations to the Conservative Party. He gave them £5 million. I mean, you can just buy these titles now, and it's almost as though Sunak is just putting two fingers up and saying, "Sod it, the guy's given us $5 million, and we need the money. Here's his knighthood." Just the same way as he behaved with a guy last week. I've forgotten his name for a second. Anyway. Sunak, in his first year as Prime Minister, has spent in excess of £2 million on private jets. £2 million. We've got children starving. He spent £2 million on private planes. And, he took last week, that huge jet, that 300-seater, up to the north of England to give a speech. The speech is usually 5 minutes. He answers a couple of questions, gets back in and goes home again. It's just beyond belief. And now it's another subject which I'm not going to talk about at the moment because people tend to phase out, but these free ports and these special economic zones, they are famous. We're having, I think, about 70 or 80 special economic zones, and I think a dozen free ports around the country. These areas are areas of the country which are given over to private management. They are famous for being places where money laundering, tax evasion and smuggling takes place. I mean, an invitation to it. The idea is that firms are given all sorts of incentives to go and transfer into these places or set up businesses in these places. And what happens is they just move out of one area and they move into these free ports and special economic zones out of the touch of government, and they can do what they like. It's absolutely crazy, and it's desperate. And just to show how crazy the whole world is, or this country is at any rate, there's a comedian, you might have seen, he's called Ed Gamble. And he's about to start a tour, and it's called Hot Dog Diggity or something. Anyway, the title of the tour has got hot dog in it. And he put some posters up. He had some posters done, or his publicity people had some posters done. And then the poster showed him standing behind a table. On the table was a plate with a hot dog on it. And that's just a link to the name of the tour. London Transport made him take these down. He said that it was against their policy of advertising food which is high in salts and sugars and whatever. And so he had to replace them all, and he rather wittingly replaced them replaced the hot dogs with pictures of cucumbers. Incidentally, Transport for London, TfL, run the Underground. They have 729 staff who earn more than £100,000 a year. And so here we are, 14 years of Tory rule, most expensive in privatisation, most expensive energy in the world. We've got the most expensive and largely unreliable trains in the world, all foreign owned. Almost all our rivers and shores are filled with sewage. We've got the lowest state pension in Europe. We've got the biggest fall in living standards since the war. We've got the longest healthcare waiting lists in Europe, 7 million, and our nurses receive the lowest pay in the whole of the OECD. But the plan's working. The plan's working. And so I wanted to talk a bit about the economy and try not to be too boring about it, but there was an article in the Evening Standard last week, and it was talking about the number of businesses, particularly restaurants and nightclubs and so on, that have closed in the last 2 or 3 years. And it said that since March 2020, across the whole of the UK, 13,793 nighttime economic businesses have been lost up to December 2023. More than 15% of the total. In London alone, there are 3,100 have closed. Now, if you think about starting a business, okay, suppose you want to start one of these nighttime entertainment places, a restaurant or a nightclub or whatever, and you think about what's involved. You think about how complicated and time-consuming and how much money and dedication it takes. You have to raise the money in the first place. Open a nightclub, you probably want a couple £100,000, or a restaurant. You've got to find premises, you've got to negotiate with agents, you've got solicitors, you've probably got accountants involved. Eventually you get the premises, and then you've got to do them up, you've got to get in the decorators and the builders, you've got to install a kitchen perhaps, buy all the kitchen equipment, etc., the tables, the chairs, the cutlery, the crockery, all this stuff you've got to do. Huge amount of work and effort to set up a business. And then you've got to find staff. You might have 20 staff in a business like this. And so you get all the staff. And eventually your business starts running, and you owe £250,000 or whatever it is, because that's the money you've invested or people have invested on your behalf. And then you start running the business. Well, you make a living out of it for a while. You're not getting any money back. That's all tied up. And then after a while, for various reasons, people haven't got as much money because all the prices are going up. Everything's getting more expensive. People can't afford to go out eating anymore. And so you find your turnover is going down a bit. And so you then have to start cutting down a bit. So you might have to get rid of some of the staff. You might have to close your restaurant a couple of days of the week. And then you go on a bit longer and a bit longer and a bit longer. And eventually you start running out of money completely, and you've borrowed on your credit cards to you're even that desperate, and eventually you just have to give up. And your business then becomes absolutely worthless. All that you've bought, because there's no market for second-hand restaurant stuff. And the boards go up outside your shop, so you're yet another shop with a board up in front. And all that effort is gone. And when you think about it, when that does happen, all your suppliers, apart from your employees, all your suppliers, the people that supply your food, the people that supply this, that and the other, and all the people that you need to deal with, maybe dozens and dozens and dozens of suppliers, they all suffer slightly because you've closed down. So that when you get a situation where businesses are closing down because they can't afford to go on, it spreads. It's not just those businesses that are involved. It spreads and it spreads and it spreads. And not only that, nobody right now, knowing how difficult things are, knowing how many businesses are closing down, nobody's gonna start a business now. Nobody in their right senses, in their right mind, is going to borrow money and set up a business now, and go through all that hassle, all that stress, all that worry, and lose all that money, or risk losing all that money. And so when the government and the opposition both say that the solution to all our problems is going for growth, we're going to grow for growth, are they going to get all these people to open all these restaurants? That's just one sector. How are they going to persuade all these people to insanely risk all this money to set up businesses where they've got little or no chance of succeeding? You see, it's so easy, and we keep hearing this from Sunak and from Starmer and from Reeves. Going to grow the economy. It's like, I think I said last week, it's like a manager of a football club saying that where he's going to get to the top of the league is by scoring more goals. It's just talking. It's absolute nonsense. And I think anyone who thinks that a change of government is going to mean that we're suddenly going to start all these businesses opening up. I mean, what sectors are going to going to have any possibility whatsoever? If you look at what's happened to the country over the past, since Brexit, you look at the fishing, it's all gone. Look at farming. The trouble that farmers are in now, they can't get workers, they can't compete with cheaper imports. They're all in trouble and really struggling. Look at manufacturing. What do we manufacture? I know at high end, aero engines and very complicated AI we're brilliant at, but that isn't enough to sustain an economy. We've lost so much of our export market by leaving the EU. What are manufacturers going to manufacture that's going to make up for what we've lost? It isn't going to happen. Look at the hospitality, as I said before. Hospitality is collapsing. Nobody can afford to go out. And when you go down the high streets, you see all the boarded up shops, and people say, "Oh, it's online. Online's done it all." It's not online. People haven't got any money to buy anywhere. Oh, of course, online has taken a big chunk of business, but it hasn't killed the high streets. What's killed the high streets? Nobody's got any money, because our economy is doing so badly. Now, I did at this stage want to talk a bit about the City of London, the city which is so vitally important to our economy, which generates so much taxation, and which has been and still is one of the biggest, most important exchanges in the financial centres in the world. There are and there have been some quite alarming reports in the press recently about how investors are pulling out, and how they're favouring New York, and how a lot of quite big companies already listed on the London Stock Exchange are looking at moving. And I want to talk about the consequences for our economy. I also wanted to talk about Labour's prospects of turning the economy around, which in my view are very, very low. However, I noticed that I've been talking for 20 minutes or more, and I'm sure if you're still watching, you're probably getting bored. So, what I will do, I'll make a separate video, and with a bit of luck, I'll try and show it next week. So, if you have stayed until now, you're still watching, thank you very much indeed. And if you haven't already subscribed, I'd be really grateful if you do so, or if you know anybody you think might be interested. And so, until next week, thank you again, and bye for now.